Hello and welcome to a very special episode from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm joined by Charlie as always, and we are going through the January transfer window. The deadline was at 11 o'clock yesterday evening, and unlike the Premiership, there's been plenty of action down at the second tier. So we've got a lot to get through. We're going to go through every club and just talk about the key elements of the transfer window. So if you're looking forward to that, please do put a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for regular content from us. You can see our latest score predictions for midweek up in the eye above. But we said alphabetical order, so let's start with Barnsley, Charlie. Matty James left his loan spell for another Championship club, which we'll get on to later. Young centre-half Liam Kitchen comes in from League 2 Forest Green after a solid start to the season, but the main additions have been up front. Young striker Daryl Dyke, a bit of a punt from Orlando City in the MLS, but most notably perhaps Carlton Morris, who comes in from Norwich following his loan at MK Dons. Do you think these two can be the answer, Charlie, to the second lowest scorers in the top half of the Championship?
Well, it's funny you say that because, to be honest, in terms of goal difference, they're obviously in a negative. And I think they're in a unique position, to be honest, Dan. They're mid-table, bang mid-table, but with a negative goal difference. And actually, you do need to address that up front. I think what I will say is, given the expectation Barnsley had at the beginning of the season, they're to take this. Yeah, I think it's good. And what I like is they're gambling a bit on younger players. It could be easy to fall into that trap of let's consolidate, let's maybe overpay a little bit. Because we all know that January, as we'll probably discuss quite a bit in this episode, January can be a bit of a haywire time where people end up paying over the odds because desperation and stuff like that. They've addressed the areas that need to address with some youth. So I think actually it's for the good of the game as well as Barnsley in that sense.
On to Birmingham City, who have also focused on attacking reinforcements. Multiple midfielders left the club, replaced by lone midfielder Raheem Parker from West Brom, defender Jan Valery from Southampton. The main events, though, again up front. Young striker Keandra Simmons on loan from Man City, but more importantly, perhaps, proven SPL goal scorer Sam Cosgrove on a permanent. He comes in from Aberdeen. Can they address the issues in front of goal for one of the Championship's lowest scorers?
To be honest, there's quite a few issues in it, not in a disrespectful way to Birmingham. I think it's a bit more than just getting a centre forward. To be honest, I think they're having difficulties getting it up the pitch and in, for want of a better phrase. So I think, Sam Cosgrove is a great player, and you've seen him at Aberdeen, and people will speak disparagingly of Scottish football, but those of us like me and you watch it properly, to score as many as he has up there, he's a very good player. So I think that's a good start. I'm a bit concerned about maybe bringing a lad from Man City, 19 years old, centre forward, a bit part player. I get that. But really, the situation there, and you need a bit more experience and a bit more sort of used to playing at that level. So I think it'd be a good experience for the lad, but I don't think he's going to add too much to them, to be brutally honest.
Blackburn Rovers, their attention's much on the other end of the pitch. Only Reading have conceded more in the Championship's top 8. But could the young loan signings of Jared Branthwaite from Everton and Taylor Harwood-Bellis from Manchester City help address that?
Yes and no. I don't like saying this because it's a cliche, but they do have a very much a Kevin Keegan approach. So they can always outscore teams. They need a bit of depth at the back. I think that's proven that this year. When they've struggled is when they've had injuries, and particularly across that back line. So yeah, I think of the two, Jared Branthwaite, although slightly younger, is probably the more established, and I would say probably got a better reputation. So I think he'll be a better chance of starting. But it's good to have those options. And I think it was, again, a good experience for those young lads. And it's good to see these lads coming down from Premier League clubs and getting experience there, albeit that, a club like Blackburn's probably a safe bet if you're a club like Man City. They're not near the bottom. Probably not going to make the playoffs, but we'll see.
Let's move on to Bournemouth, expected to be one of the big hitters. They replaced Dan Gosling in the middle with Jack Wilshere and Ben Pearson, who comes in from Preston. But things came to life in the final few hours of the window because Josh King left for Everton with his contract going down, and Shane Long came in to replace him from neighbours Southampton. So the question is, Charlie, is that enough to help Bournemouth address the 8-point gap to second?
Well, they've lacked goals. They've lost the last 3. It's not looked great for them in front of goal. They have looked a bit toothless. He is a proven goal scorer. No matter what you think of Shane Long, he is a fantastic player, and I think he'll do really well there. For me, not the signing of the window. There's one later on that I'll go on to, but he's up there because great bit of business, genuinely great bit of business.
Fair enough. On to Brentford. Their window was dominated by loans out and the inevitable permanent deal of Said Benrahma to West Ham, which, as a West Ham fan, I'm sure you're delighted about. But having said that, you got very excited on deadline day because you saw Winston Reid joining the club.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that for me, that is such an astute signing because we've always said about Brentford, I'll rephrase that. I've always said about Brentford and their mentality, and particularly when it gets a little bit near the crunch sort of time or when they're expected to win and things like that, and that mentality, and you saw that, bless him, in the playoff semi-finals last year. Winston Reid, however, whatever you think of his age, he is an experienced and a stalwart at the back. What I will say is he won't take any prisoners there. I've watched him so many times. He'll bring an experience of a Premier League footballer and he will not mess around with it there. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be long ball sort of football, but he's a very tough defender. So for me, definitely the signing of the window. And I think it is that mentality you're talking about, an international footballer, really going to hopefully shore up their back line when it gets a little bit crunched. They're doing well as it is, but you've just got that added experience. So for me, signing of the window personally.
And on to Bristol City, where it was a little bit quieter, I think it's fair to say. Chris Brunt left the club on a free, and his replacement was Henry Lansbury from Aston Villa. Now, he's been excellent at this level in the past. Can he do it again?
Yeah, he's only 30, Dan. You know, he's one of those players because he probably had a break for such a young age. No, doesn't get written off, but he's an older head. He's getting the wrong side of 30. He's only 30 years old now. I think it's a great signing. I think again, similar to what I was saying about Winston Reid, you've got a bit of experience from the league above, but he's a very calm player on the ball, and you just get that feeling of Bristol City sometimes. They're so erratic, it's just a bit of a hot potato, for the want of a better phrase. So I think you've got a bit of calmness and a bit of an astute player in the middle there. So for me, again, I think that's a good sign. And what I would say is that he's probably not got the best injury record. So if they can keep him fit, I think he'll steady the ship a little bit more for him, because their form has been up and down, great at times, but also woeful at others.
And on to Cardiff, who were focusing a bit further down the EFL with their signing. So young players in the shape of Max Waters from Crawley, Perry and G from Crewe. Crucial experience with Aidan Flint returning from his loan at Sheffield Wednesday. But Mick McCarthy on deadline day. Welsh international Johnny Williams from Charlton. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, those of you who've watched that Sunderland documentary will know he's a very committed player. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think that's what you need in that situation. Taking away sort of the nationality and that kind of thing. You get that impression that he's 100% in whatever he does. So I think they need that, but he is a good attacking midfielder as well. And I think Cardiff have lacked a little bit of that creativity. They've become a bit too direct, and I think you've got a bit more guile in the middle there now, and it just gives you another option. And that's what we say about Mick McCarthy. I think he's a well-rounded manager. I gets a bit of a rep for being pragmatic, but actually, you watch his teams, yes, there is times, but there are also times that they do play through the thirds well. And I think he's a key linchpin for that, really. So I think you'll see a lot of him between now and the end of the season.
And next up, solid additions at Coventry City too. The loan addition of experienced midfielder Matty James, who we mentioned left Barnsley after his spell earlier in the season. A young left-back Josh Reed from Ross County. Another loan signing in Victor Gyökeres, who came in from Swansea, where he had a loan the first half of the season. And young attacker Fabio Tavares was the punt on deadline day from Rochdale. Is it perhaps more of an eye on the future in this window for Coventry?
Yeah, I think we've been quite vocal about the fact that as good as Coventry have been, they have lacked that cutting edge up front. Have they done enough to address it? Like you say, I think this is more an investment. I think, I genuinely think they'll be all right. I don't think they'll go down this year. So I think it is looking to the future. Having said that, forgive the pronunciation, Gyökeres, it's a good loan. I can't see, he's a young player. He's going to be hungry. He's going to want to prove himself. Obviously, I think long term, he's going to probably want to get in the first team back at Brighton. So this is a great opportunity for him. So is it a good signing? Yeah, I think actually mentality wise, maybe you want players like that in there, but they do need to address that up front. It's no good having these two lads coming in and then benching them for between now and the end of the season, to be honest.
Absolutely. And we move on to Derby, who I'm going to give a rare opinion on my winners of the window, because the Rooney and McLaren team on deadline day had 5 loan signings, all of whom very good. So young defensive prospects, Ted Mengi and George Edmondson from United and from Rangers, respectively. Promising midfielder Benny Beningame from Everton. Exciting winger Patrick Roberts from Man City, where it didn't quite work out at Middlesbrough earlier in the year. But the big question here, and I know we're going to talk about it with a couple of other strikers too, could the experience of Lee Gregory be the answer to their goal problem?
Well, yeah, and it is that goal problem. I think outside of I think there was 1-4-0 against Birmingham, wasn't it? The rest of all pretty much, as you've alluded to in the predictions, 1-0 specialists. So, yeah, and the thing is as well, you're talking about someone who is, what's the best way of putting it? I don't want to plug an interview. We spoke about Matthew Tipton, and he said that when he got later on in his career, he wasn't going to run channels. He's not going to do all that kind of stuff. He's just going to be a centre forward who's going to score goals. And I think that's what you get with Lee Gregory. You're not going to try and remold him. You're not going to try and get him to do stuff he's not good at. But he is a great finisher. So I think it's a very, very astute signing. I think he's someone who hopefully will elevate them up the league. And we mentioned it about how we think Rooney's going to do in one of our episodes. And I sort of had a mid-table, comfortable sort of position. And I think his window has hopefully strengthened that. And Patrick Roberts, as you said as well, another exciting player. And I think he's going to beat people on the outside and get balls in the box. And that's where you want Lee Gregory in there. So I think it's a great little combo they've got up there, to be honest.
Absolutely. And on to Huddersfield. So a couple of young additions for the future there. They lost winger Adama Diakabi to France. However, lots of experience in as well. So we've got Rolando Aarons, formerly a hot prospect at Newcastle, sort of drifted away over the years. Keeper Jason Lutweiler from Fleetwood. Richard Keogh from MK Dons, which I know has been talked about on the podcast. And Dwayne Ho from Derby. I guess with the away form that we've talked about throughout the season for Huddersfield, is that a bit of experience just what the doctor ordered?
Well, yeah, and also, I mean, their last 5 games, they've drawn 1 and lost 4. Goal difference is heading south quite quickly. So Richard Keogh, regardless of the outside stuff, he's a very, very good defender, very experienced defender, and probably would be playing higher had not stuff happened outside. So he's going to shore that up. I think they need that. The thing is, the home form up to recently was very, very good. I think it was the away form. And actually that experience, if you've got older heads, you've got senior pros in there, there must be some experience. I know it sounds silly, it sounds like you're talking about children, but genuinely, the way you approach away games is different to home games. And I think if you've got lads who've been around the block a bit like that, Rolando Aarons, for example, 25, admittedly, he's not one of the oldest, but he's been at the big clubs, he's done the big away trips, So I think that'll hopefully shore up their away form a little bit, but it does need to hit the ground running quickly because they are heading south very, very quickly as it stands.
Couldn't agree more. On to Luton Town, and I'll keep my opinions very much to myself on this one. A straight swap earlier in the window. Reece Norton-Davis poached by Stoke. We've talked about that before. Cal Naismith in to replace him on the left. But on deadline day, we finally got the attacking arrivals. Elijah Adebayo, a bit of a punt from League Two Walsall, where he's been scoring goals for fun. And Tom Ince on loan. Might that provide the much-needed firepower?
Yeah, to be honest, the thing is with Luton is earlier on in the season, there was a period where James Collins, where every touch went in. And then I think for whatever reasons, injuries, etc., it sort of highlighted a little bit. There was a little bit of lack of depth up front. And I'll probably get a bit of stick from this from friends, but, obviously Elliot Lee's gone out to Oxford as well. Yeah. So they're going to have to replace that, even not backup striker, but that sort of area. Danny Hilton, for whatever reason, I've always rated him as a footballer, but he's not in great form in front of goal, sadly. So they had to do something about that. And I think, like you say, Tom Ince, although officially a winger, I think you can play him off of a front man and stuff like that. You've just got a bit of creativity, you've got a bit of goal, but also, and this is the important bit for me, you've got someone who wants to prove himself. He's now 29. He's got to be looking at his career and going, I had a lot of potential. I've done this, that, and the other. But here, there's no pressure. It's not like, he's the big name, gone for 4 or 5 million to Derby or whatever. There's no pressure here. I think you'll see the best of Tom Ince here. And it suits Luton's style of play. He's a very good attacking flair player. And I think Luton maybe lacked a little bit of that towards the last few weeks. So, and Adebayo from Walsall, good young hungry player. I mean, I think it's 10 goals this season already. Yeah. So, he's clearly a clinical striker. And I just think it gives it a competition up front, but also it gives them that extra option that if so-and-so gets injured or you need to change a bit of the style of play for a certain game, gives Luton a bit more dynamic play up front, to be honest.
Yeah, we are flying through the quick fires now, and we are on to Middlesbrough and Neil Warnock, where the focus has very much been on the wide positions, I think it's fair to say. Aside from the keeper, Jordan Archer, they've got Darnell Fisher from fellow Championship side Preston at right back. They've also signed Neeskens Cabano from Fulham, Nathaniel Mendes-Lang, and possibly pick at a bunch, Yannick Bolasie.
The thing is, though, you've also got Duncan Watmore there, who they signed on the quiet as well. So the problem is, and I've said this before about some teams when we did other videos, is that's great, and they're all in their own right great footballers. But actually, if you've got too many of them, Yannick Bolasie, I'm not casting dispersions on people's character or anything like that, but is he going to want to sit on the bench? Maybe not, I don't know. But they definitely lack that width. I think Middlesbrough got found out recently. Warnock's very good at what he does, but he needed to have a plan B, and I think this is added to it. My worry is that they've got a lot of players now in the same position. Is how do you balance them? How do you keep them happy? How do you get the best out of them? They're all in and around that sort of late 20s, early 30s mark, so they're not going to want to go there and sit on the bench. So it's going to be a bit of a balancing act for him. What I will say, though, is I think he's been very astute that he's got them for very little money. I mean, 2 of them are on a free, Yannick Bolasie on loan, so you've got a lot of experience, and Cabano as well. So you've got a lot of experience there for very little outlay apart from wages.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we move on to probably a more worrying window for Millwall, because 2 proven Championship midfield additions, fair enough, in Kieften Beld and George Evans, but the 7th lowest scorers in the division, and they haven't addressed their forward line despite losing 2 loan players.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To be honest, Millwall, I don't know. I think it's a season of consolidation. I think they'll be looking at this going, so this season's more of a case of just getting through. Because I think, they should be fine. I think there's other teams around them who are probably going to have a more difficult end towards the season. But they've got to do something over the summer, because they can't keep just floating along like this. And I think that window is indicative of maybe where the club is at the minute. It's a safe bet. It's a couple of defensive midfielders who are just going to shore things up, but it's not going to excite anyone. It's not going to bring the crowds in when we're allowed back or anything like that. But I think Millwall deserve better than that. I think Millwall, are a better club than that. So I'll be honest, I'm disappointed in their window. It's not really added anything. It's not going to make any difference. I'll be amazed if they float anywhere outside of where they are now. They're 16th now. I think between now and end of the season, you'll be looking somewhere between 15th and 18th with that kind of window that they've got.
Yeah, I think you join most of the fans in being a bit disappointed by that window. But let's move on to Norwich City at the other end of the table. They haven't done a great deal, and let's be honest, they probably didn't need to. They've plugged a couple of squad gaps. They've got Greek left-back Giannoulis on loan. They've also signed experienced Norwegian keeper Nyland, who was previously at Villa until the summer. But was it perhaps more important that they, A, invested in the future, which they did with Bolton's Regan Riley, and more importantly, kept hold of their stars?
I think so. And you've got to look, we spoke to, obviously, Roy McGivern of Linfield, completely different situation, but when you're at that end of the table, you're always looking ahead 2-3 years down the line. So I'm not saying Norwich are going this far, but they must be having half an eye on, there's a good chance we're going to go up now. What investment can we make now to set that foundation of a bigger summer? Obviously, the window they've had here is not going to set them up for the Premier League, but it's just like you say, plug those gaps, give them a few squad players. So when in the summer, they can bring in some maybe not bigger names, but more players who are going to be better suited to the Premier League, you've still got that backup. You've still got those players if you have a cup tie and all that kind of thing. So, with the exception of Nyland on a free, all under the age of 25 as well. So, I think it's a good investment, and that's a good window for Norwich. But they have to be looking for half an eye on the Premier League now, surely.
Yeah, and on to Nottingham Forest, who again didn't have the busiest window. Midfield's additions of Krovinovic, the former Croatian under-21 international, James Garner on loan from Manchester United, much talked about, but probably given their misfiring forward line, which we've talked about basically every week in the prediction show this season, is Chris Hughton reuniting with Glenn Murray the masterstroke of the transfer window?
I don't know if it's the masterstroke, because the problem is with Glenn Murray, he hasn't played. I think he's played 4 times since he joined Watford back in the summer. So you're going to have to get him to hit the ground running quickly. So I think he's not going to get. I don't think you see the best of Glenn Murray till the end of this month, and when he's a bit more match fit. James Garner did very well at Watford as well. But yeah, Glenn Murray he always scores goals, and it's similar to what we said earlier about Matthew Tipton, for example. You're not going to get him to run channels. You're not going to get him to do this and the other. But anything in and around the 18-yard box. I've seen him live quite a few times. He's so clinical. So for me, I think probably not the best sign of the window, but up there with one of the top 3 or 4. It's just about getting him match fit quickly.
And you're going to have to bear with me on this one, because the award for the biggest player turnover in this window goes to Preston. The most talked about out for obvious reasons is Ben Davies to Liverpool. We're going to ignore that because that's basically all everyone else has talked about. Ben Pearson, Darnell Fisher, David Nugent, Josh Harrop, Jayden Stockley, all out as well. Income, Ben Whiteman from Doncaster on a permanent, and 7 loan additions. So we've got the proven experience of Ched Evans, Greg Cunningham and Liam Lindsay, among a few others. And then also some young talent in Jason Malumbi and Anthony Gordon. I know there's a couple of others too. But is this churn of players going to resolve the home form issues in your eyes?
I don't know. I don't like the look of this in January. I think this is massive turnover. I think, admittedly, the one, David Nugent for Tranmere, a great signing, but was in and around the periphery of the squad anyway. But that's a lot of players to try and bring in and then try and make work really quickly. So on that basis, no, I don't think it will, because I think the problems with Preston's home form runs deeper than a change of personnel, really. And it's a bit like for like the lads I have brought in. So for me, it's an okay window. It's a lot, but it goes all the way down to Sunday League, even where we play. You're bringing a lot of players. It's going to upset some. You start to mess around with the harmony of the club too much. So, and Preston are erratic enough. The last one they needed was more instability. So I think I probably would have taken a handful out of those as opposed to try and get them all in one go. But I just think it's a bit too much too soon.
And next up, we head down to West London, because although a star was lost in the shape of Bright Asay Samuel for QPR, they've added loan experience throughout the spine of the team. So they've got Geordie de Wicks in defence from Hull. In midfield, they've got Stefan Johansson from Fulham, who's done well at this level in the past, and Sam Field on loan from West Brom. But is it fair to say, Charlie, that your namesake is the signing of the window up front in terms of the strikers?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you've seen that since he's come back. Charlie Austin, he's obviously already scored a few goals. And more importantly, even against Watford last night, he had a hand in all of the good things. Talk about moments in a game. He was part of all of them for QPR. Yeah. So, I think probably, like you say, in terms of up front, the sign of the window. But Stefan Johansson, he's a good player in the middle. So I think they've added a bit of experience there with him. I just think that QPR need a bit of stability. You've got that with Charlie Austin. You know what you're getting with him. So I think in terms of personnel, a good small window would have done them. But Charlie Austin alone was probably going to save them, to be honest.
Absolutely. On to Reading, who probably forgot to set their alarm and just slept through deadline day, which I guess with key players coming back from injury and their early season form when they were all fit, is that actually a bad thing in this instance?
Well, no, we sort of mentioned it with the opposite of Preston, really. It's a cliche and I don't like using it, but if it's not broke, don't fix it. Obviously, that kind of thing. But Reading have been in good form. Unbeaten in the last 5 games, really. An incredibly high goal difference. So actually, do you need to faff around with it? No, I think they've probably been the most sensible one. And you have to look at it. We are still talking about football. There isn't fans. I know they still get a bit of TV money and stuff. Do we need to go spending money when we don't necessarily need to? So for me, actually, probably one of the most sensible windows, albeit that they didn't really do any work at all.
And a couple of loan deals in and out of Rotherham this January as well. Ryan Giles comes in on loan after half season with Coventry. But Lewis Wing's a really solid loan addition in the middle of the park from Middlesbrough. Probably the standout one for them, isn't he?
Yeah, and I just think with Rotherham, they've just started to turn a corner, and I'm actually quite pleased they haven't tried to overhaul the squad. Their away form is something they need to address. But you're talking about a lad who's been at a big club like Middlesbrough, and that has to bring some sort of experience with it. So yeah, obviously, hopefully it'll address the away form. I think they just needed a bit of shoring up in the middle. They do score goals, and I think that wasn't necessarily the issue for Rotherham. It's maybe defending, but defending a bit higher up the pitch. I think you can't keep relying on that back four. So maybe someone like him in the middle is just going to give him a bit more of a stalwart in there, shore him up a little bit more protection.
Absolutely, and he's got a tendency to score a screamer every now and then too. But let's move on to Sheffield Wednesday. Sticking with Yorkshire, there's turmoil off the pitch, and to be honest, it reflects in the transfer window they've had. Aidan Flint returns to Cardiff. His loan was cut short. The Izzy Brown loan's getting off the pitch headlines. It's starting to get a bit ugly financially. However, On the more positive side of it, club legend Sam Hutchinson returns after half a year in Cyprus, trying it over there. And Andre Green, although clubless for a while, could prove to be a spark out wide once fit.
Yeah, the thing is as well, I like the fact that they've done it on a free with Andre Green, because I just think that there's no risk then. We talk about the financial implications of it. Obviously, you have to pay him a wage. I get that. But you're not having to sort out a transfer fee. You're not having to delay that or potentially do it over 6 months and all this kind of malarkey, which just gets you in so much trouble. So, I think Wednesday do need to come up with a bit more of a dynamic sort of front line. But we did talk about that under Wednesday since Pulis has gone. They have been a bit more direct at times, but also they have been good at playing through the pitch. So I think someone like that just gives you an extra dimension. You can never have, in my sort of opinion, you can never really get a poor free signing of a winger. You always, even if they have one good game between now and the end of the season as a winger, if it's a freebie, it's always worth that risk.
And on to Swansea City, high flying. And let's be honest, despite a few loan players returning to their parent clubs, the deadline day signing of Morgan Whittaker is definitely one to excite the fans in the future, as well as experienced stopper Ben Hamer. They've got Paul Ariola on loan from DC United, which was quite an interesting one. The more immediate impact, though, has to come via the loan signing of Conor Hourihane, who's already opened his account for the club and seems to be exciting the fans.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, like I was saying about Norwich earlier, I think it's about plugging those gaps to get them ready. I think Swansea are in good form. Looks like they might be heading, towards the Premier League. So you have to start maybe thinking about that investment later on. But Conor Hourihane is an immediate signing. Whatever you think of his time, previous to Aston Villa, he is a great, great goal scorer, but also an industrious midfielder at the same time. You get so much from him. He's such a well-rounded player. And I think Swansea just needed to add that, just a bit of depth to the squad, really, because you are going to get injuries now. Games are going to come a bit thicker and faster. So to have someone like that as in your squad just to help alleviate the pressure a little bit in the middle is a great signing for me, yeah.
Stoke City up next, and they have spent most of their window trying to clear big earners off the wage bill. So despite the exit of Ince, Gregory, Rimmer, Lindsay, among a few others, there are some promising loans in as well. So we've talked previously about Reece Norrington-Davies, who impressed at Luton the first half of the year, albeit got sent off in one of his first games for Stoke. But they've also added exciting young wingers in Jack Clarke from Spurs and the young Welsh international Rabi Matondo, who's come from Schalke. So can the wingers help end Stoke's winless run?
Yeah, I think they need to. They need to come up with something different. They've gone a bit stale recently, Stoke, and I think a couple of exciting wingers will always liven up any team. I just think what's been good is Michael O'Neill. He does work better with maybe less well-known players, for want of a better phrase. I think his environment of getting the best out of players with less of a reputation is probably the politest way to put it, is more his specialist. So I think bringing in maybe slightly under the radar signings like this, albeit on loan, that'd be my only concern, is there's not much investment in terms of these lads that are all going to go back at the end of the season. But for now, for the here and now, could that be enough to push Stoke up there? I don't know. It needs to be, because they've not won the last 5. So maybe an exciting winger gives a bit more dynamic play out wide, might help a little bit.
2 more to go. We are powering through, and Watford are the next ones up. So firstly, Danish winger Philip Zinkernagel comes in. Experienced Rob Elliott will provide cover in goal. We've talked about Ben Foster and some of the injury problems he's had recently. But it's one out in central midfield, though, and that's the main area we're going to focus. Dan Gosling coming in, replacing the outgoing Etienne Capoue. Is that solid business?
Yeah, but they've also had, I want to go on a very quick side note, the lad Domingos Quinoa, so he was a good backup player, and actually he had a bright prospect when he was at West Ham, and I don't really know what's happened, but they then needed to basically fill 2 gaps. And then Capoue, I don't know, I do like Capoue. I think Dan Gosling, you get a lot more industry, maybe lose a little bit of calmness on the ball. But actually, I don't think Watford need that. As you saw against QPR the other night, they're a bit lackadaisical, a bit slow in their play. Someone like Daz Gosling, who's going to buzz around a little bit more, get the ball off the back 4 and link up the 2. I think you need someone like that. So I think a very, very astute sign. Probably one of the top 3 or 4 out of the ones we talked about this winter.
And the final one is Wycombe Wanderers. So unfortunately, they are struggling at the bottom of the table. They added young talent on loan up front. However, Jordan Abit is a good signing from Oxford, and fans will definitely be pleased on deadline day to see the return of Namdi Offerbor, who did so well for them last year.
Yeah, definitely. And I just, again, I think Wycombe have been very good at, obviously trying to plug out wins and drag them out. And they I don't think they're giving that bad an account of themselves, albeit only 3 wins so far. They're not a million miles off of it. I still think with these additions, they might be able to push a little bit. But teams are starting to pull away from them. So Gareth, he had to do something to improve that front line. The problem is now Wycombe are going to have to come out a bit more and play. They can't go to teams and try and play for a draw. Jordan Abit coming in from Oxford as well. Good solid left back. So things like that for me, I think is probably planning for next year as much as it is trying to get them up this year.
And you'll be pleased to know that after 24 teams we are up. It was a very quick review of the transfer window. Of course, thank you for watching. Let us know what your favourite signing is from your club. Are you happy? Are you disappointed? and how do you rate your team's window? If you did enjoy this episode, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Subscribe down below for regular content from the podcast, including championship predictions every match day. You can see the latest one in the eye above. Thank you to Charlie for joining me as always. You can follow us on Twitter at HonestFootball3, and hopefully we'll see you next time.